doors when you're in the cone of death for a Category 5 storm. Call B&T Windows and Doors today to get set up. 954-233-0126. That's 954-233-0126.
You're listening to OnsideRadio.com. Catch up anytime by downloading the MyTuner Radio app. OnsideRadio.com, South Florida's true hometown station. It's time to rack it up. Oh my God! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program. Inside the Paint is brought to you by Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Yeah, hell yes! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint show.
All right, welcome into Inside the Paint here on Onside Radio, here every Monday from, what time is it? Oh, 10, that's right. 10. It's 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Well, it's 11 a.m. somewhere. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. here on Onside Radio, Inside the Paint. I'm Ethan Skolnick here with Ira Winderman. We've got a lot to get to today. We're going to introduce a new NBA-centric, around the NBA type segment in the last portion of the program, but obviously we're going to talk quite a bit of Heat here. So you can always get to him at Ira Heatbeat. You can get to me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. Let's get right to it. The one topic that I know has been beaten to death here over the past 48 hours, but we've got to pivot because Bam Adebayo has done this before in the regular season. This is a consistent pattern. We talked about one of the issues of this series. It was going to be, is he going to be consistently aggressive? We've now had some time to digest this, sort of watch some of these sequences. Some of them don't look particularly good when you can see Brook Lopez 7 feet back in space, and he's refusing to take the shot. But I'll ask you this question.
Sure.
Jimmy struggled, obviously, as much as he struggled in a Heat uniform. Was Bam's lack of aggressiveness the number one problem in Game 1?
You know, here's what I do, is I give Jimmy a pass for one reason. At the moment of truth, he produced at the end of regulation. Mm-hmm. That without Jimmy's driving layup to send it to overtime, obviously we're talking about even less sort of hope going forward. So he made his in-the-moment play. So even with the shooting percentage, he also got to the foul line. Mm-hmm. I thought at least he did enough. Obviously, Duncan played well. Obviously, Goran played very well. He got enough out of Kendrick Nunn to sort of sustain, maybe even make the argument for Trevor Ariza. So I think that leaves Bam out on an island. And even if you say, well, wait a minute, Jimmy shot even worse than Bam. My response is, but at least he took the shots.
Right.
At least, no, the 9 3-pointers are not the shots I ever want to see again, even though Jimmy told us after the game, if I get him, I'll do him again. I don't believe that.
No.
But at least there was an aggression. There was a failed aggression. You know, we talk about all scorers have those moments, but they never let it stop them. But Bam let it stop him. And it can't be as simple as a guy not guarding you changing who you are. We always hear this expression. Tyler Hero spoke yesterday about it. You attack in space. If someone gives you space, you don't have to settle for the shot. If you have 7 feet, you can get 5 feet closer for a better percentage shot. Bam's wiring. I used it in my Ask Ira yesterday, and I got in a little trouble for this. And I said, my thought is this. Bam Adebayo needs more Alonzo Mourning to him than Chris Bosh. That Chris Bosh being more of a passive big man was okay when you had Dwayne Wade and LeBron attacking and you had Birdman and some other aggressive bigs. Instead, it's almost like Bam wants to be the Bosh type when you only have a big 2 and not a big 3, you can't afford that. You need your pounding presence. It was not a good look for Bam. It was not a good game for Bam. And I think people like us can only make so many excuses going forward for Bam.
2 things on this. One is his hashtag on IG is typically bounce back, so we'll see if he does it. But the other thing that really struck me was we've talked about this stuff. Twitter has talked about this stuff incessantly. There was almost an assumption that was going to happen in Game 1. But to have Goran Dragic say it after the game, like not Jimmy, who's been the guy who's been pushing him and literally was screaming at him on the court to take a shot, but Goran to say it. And Goran to say it after the type of game that Goran had, which, not that Goran doesn't have the authority here because he does, but he has more authority after he plays like that.
He gained the gravitas in that moment.
And he's basically saying, Bam, come on. So How
But
does he react?
He also, Goran said it analytically. Goran didn't call him out. Goran said if this is the situation and Bam finds himself at these junctures, then he has to do this. If X, then Y, then Z. It was very analytical. There was no calling out.
Right.
And matter of fact, because you're more in that game than I am, you see how that gets translated to other places. Goran bashes Bam. No, he didn't.
No, and I don't think anybody said
Goran
that.
spoke simple basketball about what has to happen. I almost wish that Bam, especially because he spoke after Goran, would have followed that up a little stronger than I just missed shots.
Right.
I'll make those shots again.
Yeah.
And it just seems the way Bam is wired, I'd like to see Bam get angrier at Bam a little bit more. Like Zoe got angrier at Zoe. Even LeBron took himself on. Even Bosh crying in the hallway after something goes wrong that it meant everything. So if Bam's mindset, as he told us after the game, was this, I've just got to make those shots. I'll take those shots again. It has to be something different. My question to you is, and again, it's harder this year because we're not in the locker room and around the team, is this question. Who's the motivational force? Before you might have said it was on the coaching staff, I mean. I know you can talk about UD all you want. Before maybe Juwan Howard. He sort of had that clout as the former player. Don't know if Malik Allen, no offense to Malik Allen, has that. And I don't know if there's any SOB on this staff who don't give a rat's butt about what his players think. He's going to get in their face and be more demanding. Do you see that kind of person, Ethan, around Bam?
No, and that's why I have a feeling that somebody's going to be back next year. If you kind of get the sense. Somebody who's made a lot of money as a head coach and may want to get back in the game here to coach with his good friend. I do think there'll be I think there'll be a shift to that staff this offseason. I actually think that the staff has suffered in a couple of different ways. I think they've missed, not for what you're talking about, but I think for some of the offensive stuff, I think they've missed Dan Craig this year.
Strategically also, and we can get into that, time permitting. Even there are moments when Eric Spoelstra has a relatively neophyte coaching staff, mostly newcomers.
Right.
Jimmy Butler is on the floor scrambling for a loose ball with about 30 seconds to go.
I don't know what the hell was going on at the end of the game.
Why aren't 35 Heat assistant coaches, since they pay them all and they're all on the bench screaming for a timeout there, instead when the best case scenario was going to be a jump ball between Jimmy and Giannis and you have 2 timeouts in the bag there? I was screaming. That's one advantage, Ethan, I have of covering games from home and being allowed to be unprofessional amongst myself. I was screaming and banging my table, timeout, 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 timeout. Now, you can tell me, and I spoke to someone with the Heat who told me this, their feeling was it was such a loose ball scramble that Jimmy never had definitive possession. And Ethan, maybe that's the case. But you could at least try to call the timeout. At worst, the officials ignore you. And you're in no worse of a situation than you wound up in. I do agree with you. As a matter of fact, it's interesting, to go completely tangential here, I was even thinking if the Pacers do let their coach go because of the situation, that could be the Dan Craig moment where you can't even bring a Dan Craig back because he moves on because he's so well respected. Yeah. I've had a lot of readers, and I've had a lot of people telling me about the coaching staff this year. It seems like Eric doesn't have that one guy, whether it used to be Ron Rothstein sidling up to him, his best buddy David Fizdale sidling up to him.
Well, that's the name I think maybe
that
back.
That voice of confidence, but he's given so much power to Chris Quinn. And that's sort of what started the whole Dan Craig sort of grease the skids out of there, is that Chris Quinn sort of became the lead assistant. He was the guy working on with the prime newcomers and development coach, so Eric worked that way. And look, the one thing you'll have to agree with is this. If you're going to have a 13-year head coach, then he gets to make the calls. That if he's there that long, he's earned that right. Whether it worked out correctly, we're going to find that out. But going back to Bam, I just don't see that guy that gets in Bam's face, whether it's an Alonzo Mourning type, who's more in the executive wing, or whether it was maybe what David Fizdale was, but even more so what Juwan Howard was. I think they're lacking that a little bit.
Well, one other question on this, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's an interesting topic. I mean, do you think there's any way, if he decides not to play, which is always open, that they can convince UD with everything else that he's got going on in his life, his businesses, his family, and everything else, to basically continue traveling in an assistant coach capacity? And would it even make any difference? Because he's kind of doing it as a player now anyway.
With a voice that's full-time and in the locker room as well.
But he would be more in with the coaches, so he would have a better understanding kind of what they want. Would you think that would make any difference?
I think it would help to have UD around in some form based on what everyone's told us this season. I don't think UD wants anything to do with that.
I don't think so either.
UD wants to be a much more complete person. I just posted a story in Karan Butler at sunsentinel.com on that. And even Karan said he wanted to first explore his full personhood. He wanted to be a broadcaster. He wanted to be a serial entrepreneur. He wanted to be a social activist. And when he had done some of that, then he said, okay, had that on my plate. I tried it. Now I feel comfortable being an assistant coach. I think for UD, when he stops playing, it'll be liberating to the point where then he'll explore his personhood versus rather than continuing this 18, 19-year journey. So I think he steps away a little bit. But I do think one of the least under, however that's phrased, scrutinized part of the Heat this season has been the coaching staff. And maybe, people please don't aggregate like this, the subtle deterioration of what they previously had in place.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. We're going to talk about Jimmy in the next segment, and we're also going to talk about the Bucks, because I do think that there is this assumption that some things are going to kind of progress to the mean for the Heat, but not for Milwaukee. And Milwaukee shot so poorly from three, I don't think that's going to happen again. But let's kind of close this topic on Bam. He has typically bounced back to a certain degree, but here's what I'm afraid may happen tonight. Aggressive at the start to kind of make a point, everybody's been in his ear, and then the instincts come back, and he goes back the other direction again and gets passive. That's sort of what I see happening.
Which might work if Jimmy is more on point with his shooting percentage, and he can get away with that also. Look, you can't have the Heat change what they are. You can't say, okay, no dribble handoffs at the elbow anymore because we need to get Bam involved. Then Milwaukee wins. If Milwaukee takes you out of what you've done for an entire season because of one game, then the Bucks win in that situation. But I think Bam can still be more aggressive, well, obviously watching foul trouble, not getting offensive fouls and something like that. But he has to be more of a physical component because that's not what Brook Lopez is. Also, Brook Lopez finished that game with 5 fouls.
Yes.
Bam wasn't in foul trouble. Get him in foul trouble earlier.
Right.
Get that 5th foul in the 3rd quarter, early in the 4th. That's another factor there. Brook Lopez can get into foul trouble. When you're the last man standing and you're not necessarily athletic or agile, you can get in foul trouble. So I think if you attack Brook Lopez earlier, I think you create situations. Jimmy was passive until like the 3rd quarter or so. But I think if Jimmy's more, go at Brook Lopez, get his butt out of there, then what direction do the Bucks go in?
Well, what we also saw, I think, in this game is we talked about the Bucks and their depth and where they were as compared to last year. But I think everybody that's coming off their bench is exploitable in some way. I mean, Bobby Portis is going to have a game where he gets some points. Bryn Forbes, though, is exploitable defensively. They don't have a collection of bigs, like you say, to throw at the Heat after Brook goes out. I don't actually think we talked about Brook enough. I kind of talked about Brook in the offensive sense that typically the Heat have had success over the years when Brook gets his. Like, that's just been the way it's gone. But it's really on the defensive end that Brook is more of a problem now. It's just the fact that he does give you that rim protection. He's a very good positional defender. He just knows how to play, okay? And essentially that gives you 4+ defenders in that starting lineup that they're dealing with. So I'm with you. They have to attack him more. But the thing about with Bam is it's one thing to say, oh, he's got to take the mid-range. But it's also about, and we've talked about this many times, him getting the ball at the elbow and looking at the basket so that maybe he doesn't have to take the mid-range. Maybe he can attack on the move.
That extra space.
The extra space. And the one play last, I think it was in the 3rd quarter, where he drove into that little hook shot, which is there for him all the time. He has touch. I have never, it's weird. In the years you've been doing this, the years I've been doing this, I've never encountered a player who has the requisite skills in certain areas and does not want to use them. Like, I understand he's not a post player. Okay, but nobody's asking him to be a post player. You're asking him to be an on-the-move attack player. You're asking him to shoot the little midi. You're asking him maybe to get to a hook on occasion. Okay, there's a lot of things that he can do offensively that are not what we used to talk about with Hassan or Shaq or some of the others. Throw the ball in the post and play from there, although with Hassan we didn't really want them to do that. But it's weird to me. I've talked to players and others, and they're like, Bam at practice shows all of this. And then he gets in a game.
He has
and
a full menu.
Right, so I don't get it.
He has a full menu, and here's the deal also, and you and I have been soft-selling this year for one reason. Bam is not a max player now. He's a rookie-scale player. And we've sort of been buying him time, saying it doesn't start till next year.
Right.
You can't be a passive $30 million player. No. You just can't. And if Bam wants that responsibility and signed on that dotted line and said, I'm going to take up to a third or a quarter of this team's salary cap, then you've got to provide the
Is there
full
a
menu.
passive? Let me ask you this question. Is there a passive max player in the league? There are players that maybe don't deserve it. Tobias Harris, he's not a passive player. I mean, is there a passive max player in the entire league?
I've seen Anthony Davis at times not use his full menu also. But you know what? But the difference is you'll call it passive. I'll say no. Big men who get so caught up in their outside shot that they change themselves and aren't as aggressive.
Okay.
Bam's got to be aggressive. So Bam doesn't need to necessarily take more than 15 shots. He just has to be aggressive with his play. Here's the deal. If you get 7 feet of space and you move in 5 feet closer, when you shoot the floater, you know what you also have a good chance of getting? The offensive rebound.
Right.
You're closer to the rim. The Heat got killed on the boards in the first game. You might get second chance opportunities, which they got killed on there also. So there's so much more about getting him to the rim. And here's the other thing. It would be another story if the Heat were playing another post center. Now, for at least a third of the season, they were playing with Kelly Olynyk's dipsy doodle inside, which can get opponents in foul trouble also. They are not. Their power forward right now is Trevor Ariza. They are staying small. They're not playing Bam with Dedmon. There's no other inside factor. They got destroyed on the board. So if you're going to say we are not playing with any other aggressive big man, then how dare you?
I'm with you. We're going to talk about Jimmy Butler next. Inside the Paint, Pallet Rack City sponsor. Right back.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
When you're looking for curtains and blinds to create a space of your own, look no further than Bandalux. Bandalux can tailor your space to your needs. Create the atmosphere and ambiance you desire. We invite you to discover it at Bandalux.com. Explore our new solar control systems, range of sustainable fabrics, and energy-efficient solutions that can improve your well-being and quality of life. Witness Bandalux Beauty. Go to Bandalux.com or follow them on Instagram at Bandalux_official. For a personal experience, A Shade Above Window Fashions in Davie and Sunrise is an official Bandalux partner.
When protecting your family is your priority, there's nothing more important than the roof above the people you love. At Onside Radio, we recommend Chase Roofing and Contracting. At chaseroofing.com, they care about the customer. Chase Roofing provides reliable roof installation and repair without the destruction to our environment. Chase Roofing is powered by Tamara, who is owner and operated for 18 years. chaseroofing.com is Google top rated and a AAA standing with the Better Business Bureau. Open 24/7. Call them today. Trust chaseroofing.com to fortify and protect what's most important to you, your family.
If you're looking for a change from the everyday restaurant, then you need to get to Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant in Pompano Beach. Brats, Wiener Schnitzel, homemade potato pancakes, pretzels with mustard, and lots of German beer. Take their famous Boot Tour Challenge, and there's now outdoor seating available in their new beer garden with live music. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Checkers Old Munchin Restaurant or call them for reservations or pickup at 954-785-7565. So get over to 2209 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach to Zagat-rated Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant.
Fish fans, time to reel in the latest news in baseball with OnSideRadio.com's Marlins Minute. Here's Alex Aguirre.
The Marlins continue to keep things close in the NL East after taking 2 out of 3 from the NL East leading New York Mets and winning yesterday 5-1. Cody Poteet continues to shine and make a case for himself as a mainstay in the rotation after pitching 7 shutout innings and striking out 4. Pablo Lopez and Cody going 7 innings on Saturday and Sunday was much needed for the Fish after using 10 pitchers on Friday. All the offense in yesterday's game was in the second inning as the lineup made quick work against former Marlin Jordan Yamamoto as he surrendered 4 runs in 4 innings pitched. Cody Poteet also collected his first big league hit and RBI in that second inning 5-run rally. The Marlins are hosting a very important 4-game series against the Philadelphia Philadelphia Phillies starting today, and Philadelphia is coming into the series second in the division, but only half a game in front of Miami. Let's see if the Marlins can repeat their performance in Philly last week, taking 2 out of 3, and continue their climb in the standings. First pitch is at 7:10. Let's go Fish.
Keep up with the latest on the Miami Marlins by subscribing on most platforms by searching Onside Radio. Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local.
It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on Inside the Paint here, sponsored by Pallet Rack City on Onside Radio. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. Make sure that you check them out for the best racks in the business. All right, let's get to the other Max player, the one who currently is a Max player, the one who's going to be a Max player here for a long time, which is Jimmy Butler. You mentioned he did fill up the stat sheet. There's no question. He made the shot at the end of the game. He did what he should have done most of the game on that play, which is attack the rim. 9 3-point attempts. Now, there are some basketball reasons for that beyond just his predilection in the game. One is the lane was closed a lot. Okay. That's the major one. But a lot of them were by choice. And his comment after the game, you and I have both talked about this on this show, and I've talked about it in others. And Jimmy's a contrarian. He likes to play the media game. If you say one thing, if you want him to do something, he's going to say he's going to do something else. There's no way in hell he thinks that's the right strategy for this team.
If he did, I would be very concerned if I was a Heat coach or even a teammate there.
Right.
And the fact that you said the shots were there and they were taking away other stuff, once you capitulate to what the defense wants, the defense wins.
Right.
Even if you make some of those shots. In other words, if Jimmy would have made 3 or 4 3-pointers, the Bucks certainly, you know what their quote would have been, Ethan? We'll live with that. Right. We'll take that. We'll accept that.
Same as with Giannis on the other side. Every time Giannis pulls up from outside 10 feet.
Jumper, yeah.
Right. I mean, you're like, okay, you got what you wanted. To a certain degree, that was the case with LeBron and Dwayne for large portions of their careers. So I get it, okay? And look, Jimmy made a couple of them, so, I mean, the percentage was not great, but it wasn't like he was 0 for 9. But the point is, I don't think he'll actually do that. I have a bigger issue with Jimmy that I think led into some of what happened in that game. I know he wanted to guard Giannis. I know that is his thing. He doesn't want to lose to Giannis. It's one of the players, for whatever reason, that is on his list, okay? I don't think it's smart. I just don't. And it's not because he can't do it. It's because it takes so much out of him.
Yes.
And here's my thing, and my co-host on 5 on the Floor made this point, Greg Sylvander, and he's totally right. Look, if Jimmy's going to take that assignment, then the onus is on Bam even more to be aggressive. You can't make excuses for Bam when Bam is not drawing the harder assignment.
He's expending his energy on defense.
And here's the thing. I trust Jimmy to put the offense on his back, but I don't trust Bam. And if that's the case, give Bam more of the reps on Giannis and not Jimmy. I don't want any of Jimmy's energy being expended other than what he typically does on defense, which is obviously hound people, play the passing lanes, and usually take a guy who's similar size to him, okay, and take that guy mostly out of the game. Let him guard Chris Middleton, who's really good, but he doesn't put the physical demands on you that
he's going to run you off a
does.
ton of screens, but it's going to be different, or even guard Drew Holiday. It's another matchup that they could handle there also, but it's interesting, Ethan, as far as the Heat are smart enough, and Eric Spoelstra is smart enough to realize that you sort of give your superstar what he wants. That's what keeps your superstar happy. And so I'll digress now a little bit to our fun little Friday night, because this all plays into it. When, it wasn't at the Athletic, it was in a stadium show, Shams Charania comes out. And again, this is the old, sometimes you say things on shows like this and TV appearances you never would put into print. So Shams never tweeted this. This was something that Stadium just put out on their site to say, hey, we exist. We're called Stadium. Right. You can find us on the interwebs. And Shams basically said Jimmy has had issues with some of the coaching staff. There have been tense and heated moments. And then you and I are both very close to Jimmy's agent because he's just a good guy, Bernie Lee.
Right.
He's not one of these factory agents who has 75,000 clients,
Right.
who's always doing the quid pro quo game with media where if you talk up good about my one guy here, I'll give you a tidbit about my other guy.
No, he's about one guy. I mean,
he's about one guy. He wears it all on his sleeve, and it's fine.
Right.
And so Jimmy comes. So he comes back, and Jimmy's agent, and eviscerates Shams like I've never seen before someone do, especially when there's someone you might need to have a relationship with.
That was actually my fault because I texted the tweet to Bernie, and Bernie's and then I checked Twitter. And it was there. And then he sent me a message and said, F you for putting a battery in my bag.
And then when I called him, he said, hey, did you like that? So when we saw it. All right, so you have that.
Right.
The point being is there is always some truth when it comes to Jimmy being irascible, and that's who he was.
Right.
That's who he was in Chicago with Tibbs, and then certainly with Hoiberg, who he was at the practice in Minnesota, who he was dealing with Embiid, and especially Ben Simmons with Philadelphia. So to get to your point where you're asking about who Jimmy wants to guard, I think it's difficult for the Heat to say no to Jimmy when they know that Jimmy can handle an assignment. I think it's difficult for the Heat at any point to tell him you can't shoot those threes because Jimmy's going to do what Jimmy wants. But you have to rein Jimmy in a little bit also because Jimmy is so wears his emotions on his sleeve, it might not be in the team's best interest. This goes back to what we spoke about in segment 1. So if you've downloaded this, go back to segment 1 also. Is there a person on the Heat? Is there a mentor type? Because you might say that Bam has Udonis. But who's the wing mentor on this team? I think Jay Crowder might have been that a little last season because he had been around and played with all the personalities and had his emotional share also.
He had battles with Jimmy to the point I think that Jimmy respected him.
I'm saying
because of that,
and because he was such an adversary for so many years.
Right.
Goran's not going to get in your face. God bless Goran, but he's one of the nicest guys in the world. Tyler Tuesday and his buddy and all that, he's too young to be that guy. So when you're alone, when you're on the team bus, when you're in the locker room,
it'll be next year? It'll be Kyle. Right? I mean, isn't that one of the things we're leading to here as we look at what's going on here? I mean, and that it also gets to your point about letting Jimmy get his way because we know the one player in the entire league that Jimmy wants to play with next year is Kyle Lowry.
And that's why I wrote my Sunday column with the Sun Sentinel on Kyle Lowry because every year in the playoffs there's the one looming background thought because the playoffs lead to free agency. And so last year it was Giannis.
Yes.
Even when the Heat were playing the Bucks in the series, will he rather fight or join them? Obviously that was put aside by the way they signed the extensions. So the Kyle Lowry thing is an interesting thing there also because that might moderate Jimmy a little bit.
I think that's a guy that Jimmy would listen to.
And then if you give Jimmy the extension, whether it's the 2 years the Heat will be willing to give or the 4 years that Jimmy is seeking, and again, 4 years at 32, you're getting a little into that Dwayne Wade, Mickey Arison enters the room type of situation. So I think it's difficult, but I will say this, Ethan. At this stage, after 2 seasons and a trip to the final and getting a top 6 seed, you got to be really careful with Jimmy. Because if Jimmy at all gets sideways now, you lose him, which is why I got a feeling come tonight in Game 2 at Fiserv Forum, Jimmy Butler again will be on Bam, will again be on Giannis Antetokounmpo.
So, but let me just ask you from a strategy perspective, because obviously there are deeper issues here which you've gotten into, but just from a strategy perspective, does it make sense? I mean, you want to throw a bunch of looks at Giannis. It worked. I mean, Giannis was inefficient.
Okay, Giannis was inefficient. The Bucks scored 99 points in regulation after averaging 120 during the regular season. So you could say that defensive approach worked, but I see what you're saying is, and I know, are you much of a gamer? Do you play video games?
No, but I'm aware, yes.
There's a lot of video games you play, especially FIFA, where it'll show your players are out of gas.
Right.
So your players don't have the energy and you're low on fuel. So to your point, what I understand you're saying is if Jimmy has 100 units of fuel, he can't expend 50 on defense because you need more than 50 units.
Well, that's
on
also when you decide you don't have enough units. So instead of driving to the basket, you pull up from 3. I think that's where it manifested itself in Game 1. I don't think he's shooting threes because that's what they're giving him. There was one situation that got chronicled on Twitter. There were a couple that looked terrible for Bam, but the one that looked really bad for Jimmy, I saw some people tweeting out the screenshot, was literally he pulled up on a 3. There was nobody within 8 feet of him. Okay, and it's like you said, you dribble into the space, right? There was nothing there. Jimmy typically during the season would have that look. He'd dribble into 4 guys.
Right.
Okay?
But he also has his Dwayne Wade-like hero ball moments, unfortunately. And a matter of fact, let's contrast that. I think it was the end of the Bulls game. What was the game when there were 5 seconds left?
Yeah.
Jimmy went coast to coast, pulled up for the 3 in a 5-second allotment. What did the Bucks do? Chris Middleton dribbled at least into a mid-range jumper.
Right.
What did Trae Young do? Went all the way within 3 feet of the cup and delivered the ball. Jimmy Butler still has those hero ball moments.
Ja did it last night, too. Ja dribbled into it. Morant always does that. He'll get to the cup. He can pull up. He'll get to the cup. I'm with you on that, but I think part of the reason for it was simple fatigue. I think a lot. And look, you want him playing 40 minutes in regulation in this series. You want him playing 38 to 41. Like, that's the window. Like,
and there's a 2-day break after tonight.
Absolutely. So, I mean, he's going to – but I just wonder – I just think Giannis – I understand what you're saying about Middleton driving you through a bunch of screens. But Giannis is LeBron in a sense in terms of just physicality, okay?
Right.
In terms of – in some ways, he uses his body more than LeBron does, okay? And so I don't know as you know, as cut as Jimmy is now and all the rest of this and Thanos Jimmy, whatever – the point is, I just don't think having to guard a guy 3 inches taller than him, who's that much physically bigger than him, which he is really the best play if you're expecting him to carry the offense on the other end. Because the other part, which we're going to get into in part 3, is the guys who actually played well in the game,
right,
which is Robinson and Dragic, and whether or not that is sustainable. Because if Dragic is sustainable, Ira, then yes, Jimmy can take a bigger burden defensively and turn it over to Goran down the stretch at times like they did in the bubble last year. But are we going to get that Goran again when you don't have a week off?
I know we thought that last year, and we got him just about every game, so you just don't know. And just the other thing is, with Jimmy defensively, Ethan, I would much rather the Heat be in a 99-99 game with the Bucks at the end of regulation than try to play 120 ball.
Were they in a 99-99 game because the pace was slow, or they were in a 99-99 game because people were missing shots?
Because the Bucks couldn't make a 3. Right? The Bucks make 3 more threes, and all of a sudden
I think the pace of that game was more of a 112 to 112 type game, which again is not.
But they still can't play the 120 game.
Right.
That's the Bucks' wheelhouse.
I'm with you. All right, we're gonna get into again the 2 guys who played really well in the game, and then we'll get more into some things that Milwaukee might do to adjust, because I do think that some of the things we were kind of worried about in this series didn't play out, but I think they still could. We'll be back on Inside the Paint on Onside Radio, sponsored by Pallet Rack City.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
There's no need to drive around South Florida wasting valuable time looking for a new or certified pre-owned Acura. Go to the #1 volume sales dealership in the Southeast United States. Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. Purchase with pace and space in a dealership tailored to your needs. From home buying to providing that personal touch. Contact the 2020 Satisfaction Award winner Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. 888-776-5123. That's 888-776-5123. Or visit them at 15601 Pines Boulevard in Pembroke Pines. Inter Miami CF fans, join us at our new home this season for all away games as we broadcast live at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company, 1901 North Federal Highway in Pompano Beach. Join Big O and Alex Dono for the live pregame, halftime, and postgame shows while we watch the games. Enjoy meticulously brewed beer on site, delicious artisanal pizzas, live music, and giveaways. So, the new home for all Inter Miami road games is at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company at the Pompano City Mall, where they'll feature all the Inter Miami games. Follow them on Twitter at Dangerous Minds B and Facebook and Instagram at Dangerous Minds Brewing, and visit them at dangerousmindsbrewing.com.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
Big O for M&S Air Conditioning. You know, air quality in your home and business is more important than ever. That's why you've got to call M&S Air Conditioning and let them install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit. Folks, it attracts, captures, and destroys biological contaminants to improve your air quality. With stellar customer service, answering your call from 7:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock p.m. For more info on high-efficiency air filters and their preventative maintenance plans, visit M&S Air Conditioning at ac-florida.com.
Sports fans love a place with great food, cold drinks, and TVs everywhere. That's why sports fans love Sports Grill and their 7 amazing locations. Check out the Miami Lakes location at 15462 Northwest 77th Court, located in the Ryan Oaks Plaza. Sports Grill is also now offering some great employment opportunities. All kinds of positions are now available, from kitchen to hosting. Call for more information at 305-485-8845. From wraps to salads to amazingly delicious specialty dishes, Sports Grill is the home to the legendary special grilled wings. Since 1987, Sports Grill, good food, good drink, and good friends. Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local.
It's local. For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah! All right, Ethan Skolnick back on Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program here on OnSideRadio.com. You can find us every Monday at 10 to 11. Yes, we will be on next Monday on Memorial Day. We will be here, so
will we be post-morteming? Morteming?
I don't think we'll be post-morteming. That would be after
sweep.
Game.
That would be after a sweep.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't see a sweep here, but
I could see 4 close games that could wind up in Bucks wins, though.
I could, but I don't think it happens. Here's the thing, though, that I think a lot of Heat fans are discounting. I think there is this assumption that we're going to get good Jimmy, which I think is a fair assumption based on what we've seen the past 2 seasons, that we're going to see something more from Bam, which, based on his history, I think is likely. But I think what Heat fans are sort of looking past are the things that went right in Game 1 that may not necessarily go right again. One of them is, we've talked about it, the Bucks were awful from 3.
Right.
Just awful. Could not, I mean...
Had good looks.
Good looks.
Looks.
And none of their good shooters, and I don't think they have a ton of good shooters, but none of their good shooters were making shots consistently either. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the Heat got the Duncan Robinson game, and they got the Goran Dragic game. You mentioned it. Nunn was fine. He wasn't great. He was a C+. He was a B-. He was fine, okay? I thought Dedmon's minutes were good, even though the plus-minus wasn't. When he was in there, he did Dedmon things. He set screens. He boxed out. He made a great catch in traffic and finish. To me, he was fine.
But with the Bucks not having a true backup center, there's not going to be a lot of minutes for a Heat backup center.
Right.
Because the Bucks backup center is Giannis, and you don't want to put Dedmon in there on Giannis.
Which, again, is why some of this stuff about getting the backup big was a little bit overstated. Ariza, in your view, was...
okay.
Yeah.
Okay-ish. Again, he has to make threes. The thing is, he's not going to make the Jay Crowder volume of threes because Jay Crowder has never made the Jay Crowder volume of threes except in that Bucks series, so you can only expect so much.
And Jay was taking a lot of those pull-up from the top, which is not something you want Ariza doing. I honestly, I don't want Ariza taking a 3 unless it's from the corner. That's it.
That's his spacing element. I would like to see him rebound more, but again, he's cast as an undersized power forward, so you're only going to get so much, so that's a concern there also. The rebounding is a huge concern there.
Well, it is, and they did get out-rebounded badly. Iguodala, I thought he played better than other people thought he played. What did I miss? I thought he was fine in his minutes. Like, he's fine. Like, he didn't...
I think he still has to come up bigger because he's the kind of guy you wait all season for these moments. Mm-hmm. So all season when Andre didn't seem like he was there, you got to wait for the playoffs. This is Andre's time. He's going to figure it out. He's going to be smarter. He's going to help on Giannis. So I need to see a little more from Andre as far as impact moments there. I still find Andre to be a guy who's sort of just going through this season now as if a guy, I don't know if this is the most important thing to him at this stage of his career.
Well, and we also, I think you and I both think he may end up back in the Bay next year too, which I think is more and more of a likelihood, and we'll talk more about sort of the ramifications of that as we get to off-season stuff. But let's cycle back to Goran and Duncan. This was texted to me by somebody in the organization during the game. Bam needs to stop trying so hard to get Duncan open and needs to use Duncan to get himself open or going. But when Duncan is making 6, 7 threes, and we know 3 counts more than 2, is it the worst thing that they're focusing on getting Duncan open?
It's not, except for this thing. The way they're playing Duncan is they're trailing him, so they're not switching on the screen. So all of a sudden, Bam still finds himself in the same position. And I think Bam gets discouraged in those moments when the roll opportunity is not there for him. And I think that mitigates some of his aggression when it comes to rebounding. When Bam is also the roll man in that situation, he's also getting closer to the rim. So at worst, if Duncan doesn't shoot and the ball moves, 1, he's either posted, or 2, he's in rebounding position. So again, I think Bam has to do something to get his motor going, even if Duncan is going, even if the proper play is to set up the screen for Duncan, because if they're trailing, Duncan's release is so quick, and he's so good about shooting from awkward positions and making his threes. Bam still has to stay active in those moments and not rim watching to see what Duncan's shot does. So I still think it's up to Bam, even if he's still facilitating that, to also remain active, especially on the boards.
We've talked a lot about the closing lineup this year. In this particular game, essentially it was, and there were some funky combinations that were thrown out there, including one I hadn't seen the entire season. But one was, the main one in this game was Bam, Ariza, Jimmy, Duncan, and Goran. Is this, in your view, going to be the set 5? Do you see anybody else? Do you see Tyler getting back? Because we haven't talked about him. Have we mentioned his name?
No, and I wanted to in this segment.
Right,
I think it's really important because I think it's really necessary.
Okay, but are we going to see, it feels to me like we may not see Kendrick in a lot of those situations. I feel like we saw it for a long time. He's got the starting role. That's his. But I don't necessarily think, unless he's really got it going, he's going to play down the stretch.
If you're playing a defensive game or an offensive game.
Right.
So for late in the fourth quarter, and the score is in the 90s, you can play Trevor and you can play Andre because it's going to be more about getting stops than getting scores. But a lot of the way the Heat have been playing, especially last season when they were at their best, was about outscoring you. I still think they need that Tyler boost sometime late in the game.
Tyler or Kendrick?
I think Tyler, because I think Tyler is energizing. I think when Tyler gets those scores, they come on him doing it himself. They don't involve running through as many screens. You might call them wild shots. You might call them boy wonder specials or whatever, but they need more of that. He was a non-factor. Now, this is the first time he's played a playoff game in his hometown. He had his parents there. He had his brothers there. He had his family. Maybe that was a little bit of pressure, but I think they need to get more of him. In other words, when you look at all the Bucks players who couldn't make threes, whether it's the Bryn Forms or Dante DiVincenzo and those guys, and in Milwaukee, they're talking right now about getting those guys going. I think you need another level from Tyler. I don't think you can withstand what you almost did to the finish in Game 1 on Saturday unless Tyler gives you a little bit more. He has to be more on point to be a factor in this series.
But the 5 I mentioned, though, because I'm not putting Iguodala in that closing lineup. Who does he replace?
Well, I was going to say, I think it would be Iguodala's moments. But
Iggy's not in those. Ariza was in those moments.
And you need the rebounding, and that's the problem. But Tyler's a really good rebounder as a guy who gets a scramble rebound. So if you're not going to get him at the boards because you're going to have Lopez in there in the length of Giannis, Tyler sneaks in for a whole bunch of rebounds in those situations.
Can you play that small, though? Can you, down the stretch of a game against this team, could you go, and a lot of times they go to Giannis at the 5, but could you go essentially with a lineup of Bam, Jimmy essentially as the 4, with Duncan, Tyler, and Goran?
Well, first of all, and we've spoken about it on the show a bunch in recent weeks, Duncan's defense has been pretty good.
It's been good.
And Duncan's defense has been reliable enough that I think you can. And you know what? Let's even go back to that last shot. Bucks play in transition. Smart call there. Why? The Heat were subbing offense-defense. Duncan was still on the floor.
Right.
That's really smart coaching. Spo has done that at times also. He said, I don't want to let them take their worst defender off the floor, a Buddy Hield situation they had earlier this year. I get that. So they played in transition. Duncan's defense was, from 0 to 100%. What percent of quality defense would you give Duncan on that?
I thought 80 plus.
I was going to say 85% there. Yeah. He defended that play well.
I think he's defended well for 2 months.
So I'm not reluctant to have him out there. So if I'm having Bam on Giannis and I'm having Jimmy on Drew Holiday, I can live with Duncan on Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton will make hard shots, but you know what? I don't think Jimmy could have defended that any better. Unless you had the length of Bam switching on him, which you were not in transition anyway, based on where Bam was on the court. No one else was going to be there. So I think you can live with Duncan a little bit more, and that's why when we reassess the offseason, and we spoke about Kyle Lowry and who you keep and who you don't keep, I think Duncan's made himself more of a keeper that way anyway. I've watched that final play over and over. I've seen the photos of how close that Duncan is to Chris Middleton on that. I thought that was really well defended. He made a shot. Great players make shots.
The other guy I thought played pretty good defense in game one was Goran. Like, to me, that was as active and as physical as I've seen him play defensively. And I come back to this because we talk about Tyler. I don't know what to expect from Tyler at this point. I really don't. I don't know also if the Kendrick Nunn we saw in the last 2 months of the regular season is what we're going to see in the postseason. I do know this. I've seen this from Goran Dragic before in the playoffs. Like, it exists. Right. He is this kind of player. He was this kind of player internationally. Except for the times where he was playing with Dwayne and he was so deferential to Dwayne that he would go hide in the corner while Dwayne monopolized the offense against Toronto. Okay, except for that, Goran Dragic has elevated.
He's an SOB. It's like he had the Slovenia uniform on and was making those Hulk Hogan arms again and had it go in there. A couple of things here, Ethan. You mentioned this a couple of weeks ago in the midst of that Boston series. You mentioned how when you play an afternoon game, have a day off, and a night game, it really gives you 12 hours extra rest and recovery. Point number 2, Mike Budenholzer, one of his worst things he did that people are talking about is that he paced his players too much even in the playoffs.
Yes.
That he wanted to keep minutes down. He didn't in game one.
Right.
Partially because Milwaukee's bench was that bad. Partially because he got to his senses that you don't go to the second round unless you win the first round.
Right.
I think Eric's going to keep it tight. And I think Eric can keep it tight and play Goran big minutes because of what we mentioned. Afternoon, early start on Saturday, evening start today. Then 2 days off. The telling point will be after a Thursday 7:30 start and then a 1:30 Saturday start. You know what? Worry about that then. So I think you're going to see Spo go with big minutes to Goran again if he stays out of foul trouble. He's going to play the players he trusts the most, as he should. I don't think fatigue becomes a factor in this series until Game 4.
What we're going to get into after the break is we're going to talk about the rest of the NBA in a Heat context, but also we have to talk about the Heat and sort of what this series is telling us because, like you mentioned, I mean, I think Duncan Robinson has made himself a must-keep, and I think the Goran Dragic situation is going to get more interesting. If he has a series or two like he had in the postseason last year, it's a little harder to go to the negotiation table with him and say, yeah, Goran, you really struggled this year to stay healthy and, we had to manage you, so we're going to give you a lot less than we did before.
Except
I think that becomes a little bit of more of a complicated conversation. We'll be right back on Inside the Paint, Palette Rack City, OnSideRadio.com.
You're listening to the Palette Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com. When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Palette Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Palette Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Palette Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
Hey, it's Toast. Last year when I had PGT custom windows and doors installed in my house by B&T Windows and Doors, I knew about the hurricane protection. What I didn't know? The silence. Oh my goodness, my house is so quiet now. One of those cars goes tearing down the street with the crazy loud muffler. Yeah, I don't hear it anymore. It's unbelievable. I didn't realize how noisy my house was beforehand. You've got to get PGT custom windows and doors installed in your pad today. Call B&T Windows and Doors, 954-233-0126. That's 954-233-0126.
Hey, it's Big O for EJD Construction, your custom home builder, additions and home remodeling. Our lives have changed. We're making our homes more of an oasis. Call the right place. Call the right people. Eric at EJD Construction for over 16 years. A-rated member of Angie's List and the Better Business Bureau. 305-433-4843. That's 305-433-4843 for EJDConstruction.com.
When you're looking to add that extra style and protection for your home or business, visit A Shade Above Window Fashions in Davie or Sunrise, where plantation shutters are a major part of our business, and they look great in any home. We have them in white, stained colors, and wood tones. We can even motorize your shutters like the one in the OnSideRadio.com studio. A Shade Above Window Fashions, 954-434-4774. That's 954-434-4774. Love the space you live in. A Shade Above Window Fashions.
At OnSideRadio.com, we chirp all day and night. It's time to do some more chirping with David Dwork at our Chirping the Cats report.
It's do or die time for the Panthers as they face playoff elimination for the first time on Monday night. The Cats enter Game 5 of their best-of-7 series against Tampa Bay, trailing 3-1 after getting throttled in Game 4 by a score of 6-2. Both games in Tampa were rough on the Panthers' goaltenders, and in both games, the goalie who started the game for Florida is not the one who finished. Whoever ends up in the Panthers' crease for Game 5 is going to have to be better if the team is going to have a shot at coming back in the series. Through the first 4 games, the Lightning have put up a ridiculous 19 goals, or just under 5 per game. A big part of Tampa's offense has come in the power play, where they are converting at a nearly 50% success rate. The Panthers will have to find a way to slow down the Bolts when they're on the man advantage, or just do a better job of staying out of the penalty box. Game 5 from the BB&T Center, which has increased capacity to nearly 75%, will get started at 8 o'clock.
Keep up with the latest on the Florida Panthers by subscribing on most platforms by searching Onside Radio, your home for South Florida sports. Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local.
It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah! All right, Ethan Skolnick back on Inside the Paint here on OnSideRadio.com here every Monday at 10 a.m. Yes, we will be back next week. You can get this on all the podcast apps. And we are sponsored by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah, so make sure that you check them out. All right, we're going to do this somewhat rapid fire here because we don't have a ton of time. I'll go to you on this. Let's just do percentages on this. How he's looked towards the end of the season and what we saw in Game 1. Percentage in your view that Duncan Robinson is retained by the Heat?
85%. Okay. Maybe more.
Percentage that Kendrick Nunn is retained by the Heat?
A real 50-50 call based almost as much on other players' availability as Kendrick and who he is himself.
Goran Dragic comes to you, and again, some of this is, we were talking about the cap machinations off the air, but some of this is related to that. But Goran Dragic comes back to you and says, I need more than the mid-level exception to stay here. You do what?
I probably draw a line in the sand for a 35-year-old player who I gave $18 million to this year, and I tell him, Goran, income average it out. You're still being taken care of.
I know that you want me to answer this question, so I'll go to you on it first. The chances that Kawhi Leonard leaves the Clippers if they lose this series. Down 1-0 to Dallas.
That's two different questions than we were talking about whether he comes to the Heat. Chance he leaves the Clippers 50-50 because he's Kawhi and nobody can figure him out. Chance that he comes to the Heat, I'd say less than 10%.
Yeah, I'm going to go to 15 on that, 15 to 20. Not a high percentage, but I do think that this is the only place in the league that it would make sense for him to come. I think we're at that stage. Unless he's going back to Toronto, which in retrospect, he probably never should have left.
Except it wasn't located in San Diego. So again, if the Raptors have to be in quarantine next year and Kawhi wants to come back, they'll play their games in San Diego. Yeah, and then it'll be perfect for everyone. The one thing I don't understand about this Kawhi talk, and obviously you're very active in this on the web or whatever, in stoking fires in various forms.
Why not? I stir stuff up.
How does it work cap-wise, that you're talking about Kawhi Leonard? How are you cobbling together, Ethan, $35 million? Where is this magic money coming from?
It is a significant challenge because you don't have any pieces you can re-sign for the 1 year that would be of any interest to anybody else. So that is certainly an issue. I'll get back to you on that next week. Let me go through the
I
numbers.
mean, you'd almost have to sign and trade Tyler there.
Yeah.
Keep all your other cap money. Maybe not bring back Duncan or Kendrick or
Right.
even Goran, and even then squeezing the money. I just don't see it.
But let me
Here's
ask you
what's
this question: if you could do it, we had the same discussion with Harden, but to me, Kawhi is a much better player than James Harden. I mean, if you just started with Jimmy, Bam, and Kawhi, like, does it matter?
No. Then it's any other guys anyway, and I get that. But here's the other point, and we've been glossing this over now for months, and I wrote about a column last week about this. Bam getting his extension last November instead of waiting. People like to forget about that. Ethan, this would be a different world we would be talking about. Bam's cap hold would give them $13 million more in cap space. They'd be up to at least $33 million. They could sign anyone and still bring Bam back.
Doesn't that get us back to the initial topic of this show? While Bam may not be a max player yet in what he's getting to his bank account,
correct?
He committed to be a max player for this team, and he committed to it earlier, which was his right, but earlier than they wanted to do it because of injury concern and all the rest of that stuff. If he never hurts himself in the bubble last year, maybe it doesn't happen. But he committed to that, which took them out of the game potentially.
But he had to agree to it, Ethan, and they did.
Of course they did. They had to. You're right. Not only did they have to, but they needed to.
I know we're not going to have room for some of the other stuff we talked about, but no, they didn't have to. They capitulated because they felt it was the right thing to do. The Heat right now could be sitting on $33 million
but I would have done the same thing.
and still offer the exact same contract to Bam Adebayo.
And here's the thing. We could do another hour, but here's the thing. But here's the thing. I'm with you. They didn't have to, but it was the right thing to do. But once
you don't always have to do the right thing.
You don't.
It's a business.
They did the wrong thing this year by playing Tyler Hero when they shouldn't have played him this year, and maybe they wouldn't be playing the Bucks in the first round.
Is you have Pat Riley as Michael Douglas and Wall Street telling you it's a business, but at that moment it wasn't a business.
You know he's more sentimental than he makes himself out to be, and that has been a consistent. I don't want to say
in
problem.
The last 8 to 10 years, yes.
It has.
And especially after one moment in time.
2017, okay? With what happened in 16 with Dwayne,
especially 16,
we saw what happened in 2017, and it's colored everything since, which is why Jimmy's going to get that full extension, by the way. Just watch.
4 years, crazy.
He's going to get it,
it's crazy
okay?
Talk.
But, okay.
Aggregated, crazy talk.
We're getting back to this point as we close. The Heat did the right thing. Tonight, it's time for Bam to do the right thing. Okay? You're not a max player yet in terms of what you get in your contract, but you committed to be a max player for this team. You committed early. You got the Heat to commit early. Jimmy needs help. Jimmy's your buddy. Jimmy's been pushing you out to the forefront. Take the damn shots tonight, Bam.
And aggregators out there, this is your headline. Ethan J. Skolnick, produce tonight, Bam, or don't get on the team plane home.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Inside the Paint, back next Monday. Maybe we'll be back next Monday. We love you, Bam. That's why we're saying this stuff, because we know how good you can be. No ceiling. Thanks, Pallet Rack City. Thanks to Onside Radio. Kaizen next.
Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.